All right, in this study we're going to talk about how we can access the heart, or these inner beliefs and feelings that are coming from our middle, and how we can access them through the mind and through our emotions. And for the sake of an illustration, let's imagine your conscious mind as a screen. Perhaps we'll begin with saying as a television or TV screen. Now, in today's world, there can be more than 100 channels or so on our television. On a normal television, though, you can only view one channel or program at a time. And we described a little bit earlier how, in much the same way, if I begin to talk about a hot dog or chapati or your favourite meal, you may now have a picture on the screen of your mind of this food. So to access that picture of food, you have to put whatever else you were thinking about on the screen of your mind off to one side and change the channel briefly to think about that food or whatever else it might be that we suggest. So your conscious mind is very much like a computer in this respect, having been designed as what's known as a sequential processor, or in other words, to focus on one task at a time. And in a ministry session, then we would say we're tuning in to, say, the fear channel or the rejection channel or whatever other channel or anger channel in order to view and connect with that particular emotion or more specifically the belief that's producing that. Now, thinking now of a hot dog, if we focus on it long enough, we'll begin to have something happen in our stomachs as a reaction to the thought. In the same way, when we begin to concentrate on and embrace our fear or other issues, bringing them onto the screen of our conscious minds, we'll have a chemical bodily response that we call an emotion or a feeling. Now we can begin to look for the belief and inner thoughts producing the emotion, or we can go the other way. It doesn't matter whether we present with a negative emotion and identify the belief that's producing it, or if we have a negative belief about ourselves and then find the corresponding emotion and connect with that. It's immaterial. The important thing is that we connect with them both on the conscious screen of our minds. And usually people will come presenting with negative emotions such as anxiety or fear, anger, perhaps rejection, bitterness, low self-image, and so on. Some people will look for help because of how they're reacting in relationships or to life. But as you listen to their story, you'll most likely hear the beliefs behind the emotions coming out in words of some kind. And for that reason, I usually have a piece of paper or something with me. I quite often fold it in half, begin to write on it and record the statements that I believe may be connected to the heart beliefs. And Jesus said that we will hear the overflow of the heart from the mouth. In Matthew 12:34, he says, "For out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks." For example, in the course of telling their story, somebody might say something such as, "School was a difficult time for me, but that's not surprising. I can never keep up with the other kids." So we would write that down, and when the time comes for ministry, we could say to them something along the lines of, "I heard you say before that you can never keep up with the other children. Is that true?" Now, as they concentrate on that statement and connect with the feeling that goes with it, we can ask a further question to find out the belief of the heart and how it relates to their identity or their self. Something perhaps like, "Well, what does that make you if you can't keep up with the other kids?" Now, their possible answer, if they'll allow themselves to connect with it and think about it, may be something such as, "I must be dumb." Now, the next... Very often people don't want to admit these things to themselves. It's an area of weakness, or even to you, so it may take them a moment and some encouragement to actually accept what they believe in their heart and separate that from what they know is true in their head. So the next thing that we want to do is find the place where they first learned this. That's the critical memory when they first took it to heart. And it'll be a historical matching memory with the same feeling and belief in it. And the first time is the significant one because that's when it became a heart belief. When other things happen later on that may have made our man or woman feel dumb, they interpret it through what they already believe. It just simply confirms what they already believe. Now, as we've question them, they may report as they're looking for memory something along the lines of, well, when I was in grade 3, I couldn't do my times table and the teacher embarrassed me in front of the whole class. Now that's a pretty emotionally charged situation that would cause them to come to that conclusion. So I'd probably say something along the lines of, so in that moment you believe that you're dumb because you could not do the times table. Now if they'll accept that that's the truth about self or about their identity, then I would say something such as, Lord, Fred believes, we'll say Fred, Mary, whoever, believes that he or she is dumb because he or she can't keep up with other people and couldn't do his times table. We call this part because he can't keep up with other people and could not do his times table. We call this a qualifying statement about why he is dumb, or about by whatever it is that they believe. So you could believe you're dumb for many reasons, but in this particular time, in this particular situation, the reason he believes he's dumb is because he can't keep up with other people and could not do his times table. So we want to qualify why he believes that, to give it context and make it the truth. And then we would perhaps say, Lord, his truth and heart belief is that he's dumb. What is your truth for him? And now, as Fred now has the belief, the matching negative feeling, and this historical event where he first learnt the belief pulled up onto the screen of his mind, that's the time when we ask God to reveal his truth. So Fred's truth may well be that he's dumb, but of course that's not going to be God's truth. And then whatever God does in that moment will set Fred free, simply because he is God. The key, and it's the most important part, the key for us helping Fred is finding what is believed in his heart, in this case, particularly about his identity and himself. Now, we tend to remember what is stored in the moment of emotional weakness and vulnerability. So we may not remember surrounding details because they're not necessarily a part of the interpreting the event so much as what is happening in the moment. Okay, so God could remind him that he'd been off sick. These are details that weren't relative to the moment while he was deciding that he was dumb and feeling very bad about himself. So God could remind him that he was off sick and was not present when the instruction to learn those times tables were given. Remember, this whole event, including the beliefs, were probably beneath the surface in the heart all along, and perhaps now he only knows them as a feeling or even a reaction sometimes if maybe he can't do something, and now he knows this bad feeling about himself, which is actually that he's dumb, but he may not know it in words, or he might get angry if somebody makes him feel like he's dumb and can't do what they can do. All right, so these beliefs need to be deliberately accessed and brought into the conscious mind to be processed. It's apparently normally necessary to know what you believe before you can present it to the Lord to address it with his truth. And if we don't get to the bottom, the accurate belief about the person, then God normally won't do anything, and we keep going until we get the what they really do believe. All right, so the thing is, we deal with multiple beliefs. So if we kind of round out this illustration of a television screen, let's consider the fact that there's lots of channels again. Now, when we first began this ministry, people would come to us for help, and in a session we might work through 2 or perhaps 3 beliefs and feelings that were a problem for them. And they would usually report how they felt free and it was wonderful, and we would be thinking that we just worked with the Lord to fix up their whole lives. Now, in some cases, people were happy with their new freedom because they only had a few main things, but many times we would be contacted with a report that people were struggling again. But as we began to investigate, we would find out that everything that we'd resolved in the previous session was still settled, but there were other new issues. And we've found this to be the case in ministering to others as well as receiving healing for ourselves. Most of us have a significant number of channels, if you like, or programs that need to be reprogrammed. By way of example, someone may come to you presenting a problem of fear. Now, they may have a fear of rejection, a fear of failure, a fear of flying, a fear of abandonment, a fear of spiders. Perhaps they fear that there's a lack of protection around their lives, or they fear that there'll be no provision for them, and so on. Or all of these. It could be, in fact, all of these. Each of these fears, though, is a different belief and stem from different historical events. But you can't open all of those up on your screen at the same time. You can only have one of those channels or programs running in your conscious mind at a time to go through and minister to. So it's necessary to go through them one at a time and switch them off individually, so to speak, as God ministers to each one. And how many fears do you need still running to experience anxiety? Well, just one. If it's something that can be triggered regularly through what you're doing in life. But typically, as you go through ministering to each belief, the intensity becomes less and less until the person's completely free. For example, public speaking is the number one fear, I believe, in the USA. Now, you may have a number of reasons why you fear being in front of people, and as you go through each one, fear of being embarrassed, fear of failing because you're saying the wrong thing, whatever it is, as you go through, then that experience becomes less and less, and eventually you might even enjoy it. All right, some people use the analogy of saying it's like peeling the layers of an onion, but that implies that it's just layers of the same thing, but in fact it's more like prickles or spines on a cactus. Each belief and issue is individual, and it has its own source and its own origin or beginning place. So that's not to suggest that every fear that you have needs to be dealt with before your anxiety is completely gone, or that more particularly that you're feeling anxiety. It's usually fear related to people that's ever present, such as fear of rejection, because as we've said, it's difficult not to deal with people because there are billions of them on the earth. So a fear of flying, for example, may produce no anxiety at all because you simply choose to never fly. However, if you have to fly for some reason, or you want to fly, your belief-based anxiety will quickly be present and need to be resolved. That will produce that anxiety in you. Now, of course, if you can't fly, then you may well be missing out on some aspects of life you're not free to enjoy. All right, let's talk about what I call the golf principle. And I once saw a picture of the famous golfer Tiger Woods, and he was standing beside a great big pile of golf balls that would fill a shopping trolley. And basically, as he's hitting these balls, he was practicing producing the same swing over and over again, one time after another. Now, for him, he's out there practicing these with different clubs. Now, as he goes around, the courses may change. The people he's playing against or the competition may vary. The weather conditions can be different. But basically, he is doing the same thing over and over again. In much the same way, we have a handful of questions that we use over and over and over to help people identify the things that they believe. Sometimes we'll be visiting fear channels, other times switching off all the rejection or bitterness channels. But on occasions, we'll be finding the beliefs even behind sin. So some people will be very emotionally connected and receive the ministry easily. Others will have defenses and objections, or be people who want to resolve their own problems with their minds, and so far they haven't been able to do so. And we haven't found that people can resolve heart beliefs with their own minds. It's something that only God does. All right, so whatever comes to us as co-laborers with the Holy Spirit, we're patiently and graciously giving our time, repetitively asking the same handful of questions. After a while, once you become familiar with the process, you'll find yourself ministering a truth encounter, even in a simple setting. It could be perhaps driving with someone in a car. I'm not talking about deep hurts, but simple things after a person's used to ministry, maybe even across the table at lunch. At times, we've had to minister a truth encounter in a prayer line, or the best situation is to do it more purposefully in a prayer room or some location where things are very quiet. The point is that I'm trying to make there is that once you learn the simple process, you'll be applying it over and over to different cases. And it's very, very rewarding to see God setting people free and Him allowing us the privilege of being involved in that. All right, so before we move on, I want to just push out the parameters a little bit of the conscious mind as a screen analogy that we're using. So up to this point, we've been discussing a television screen in order to illustrate that some people may have many channels and programs that need to be worked through and others just a few. It doesn't actually reflect on you as a person how many negative beliefs that you've collected. It's a bit like being clothed by life. Someone's dirty clothing may be, someone's clothing may be expensive and plentiful, others may be dirty and tattered, but in the end, underneath, minus the clothes, we're all the same people. We're just people clothed by different circumstances and conditions, and emotionally we're much the same. We're clothed by our circumstances, and we kind of wear our emotional makeup as clothing. So you can see why pictures in scripture such as removing grave clothes and those sorts of things are there. All right, well, we know that God looks at who we are, not just the outer appearance, and that includes weighing justly your circumstances and how you arrived where you are. So we cannot then judge anyone's behaviour in any way. Something happened to produce the responses. Everyone has a story, and if nothing negative happened to you, then you can consider yourself to be blessed. You need to know, though, that if you were the product of the same situations as some of these people, then you would probably hold the same beliefs and the same attitudes and behaviours. These responses to particular situations and beliefs I call universal reactions. They're predictable reactions to beliefs that are held, and we'll illustrate that in a later study, in a later unit, a little bit more. All right. So if you can imagine, now we talk about a computer or a smartphone screen, and most people today have seen either a computer or a smartphone screen, and we can use this as an analogy to kind of further examine how our conscious minds operate. Now, on most of these screens are little pictures called icons, which have some kind of symbol that depict the program that they represent. So it might be perhaps Facebook or Messenger, and you click on those icons and it opens up the program. Now the Facebook or YouTube or Messenger or WhatsApp program, whatever it is in the unit, but it's stored in a deeper place, and it's not open on your screen all the time. On my computers or smartphones, you have to click the program twice or touch on it on the smartphone with the pointer on the icon, and then the program will open up onto the screen and you can view it. The point is that these icons connect you to programs that are there underneath, whether you open them or not. Now, in the case of operating the computer, most of these are opened as a deliberate act. Now, this is the case with our minds. We can have icons on our screen such as rejection or unforgiveness or anger. Now, we don't necessarily open them up, although if a particular trigger or stressor happens, then these programs may open up automatically by themselves. All right, or more deliberate thing would be, for example, we can open the "It's time to cook the dinner" program on our touching that icon, which holds all the information stored and held as data about preparing food. Now it will come up onto the screen of our mind, and we can access what's stored in the unit so that we know how to complete our tasks. For man or for myself, there's not much there in that how to prepare dinner program because I don't cook, so I'll probably go buy pizza. All right, associations. Now with regard to our minds, these programs are often accessed by situations or circumstances automatically, and we call these associations. And perhaps the simplest way to explain this would be something like if you hear your telephone ringing. All right, your brain associates the sound with somebody wanting to talk to you. It then opens the program in your mind, which, in computers, it can be a little yellow folder, and it contains the information on how to answer the phone. It's the information that's in your memory, and most likely selects the most suitable response, depending on whether you think it's your wife or your friend or perhaps a grumpy employer or somebody else. And then we will pick the most suitable response. So emotionally, we work along much the same lines. Perhaps we're starting a new job in a crowded office. Now, without deliberately wanting to, we access the situation, accesses an anxiety belief. Now, stored in our memory file, along with the belief that produces the anxiety, is how do I react in this situation? How do I survive this situation? Now, the belief could be something like, people won't like me unless I do what they want and make them happy. And this is something that's been learnt from a past historical event. So the response to the situation, which, as I say, is also stored in the memory or in the limbic system, part of your brain, could be something such as to entertain them and be funny. Now, this may have been how the person gained acceptance and fitted in as a child in similar situations. So the behaviour coming from the I need to perform to be accepted belief is actually a mask. It's not a true representation of the person. So people often, or for that matter, it may be I need to be very religious and sound very spiritual. It would be a common one around churches if you believe you're not good enough unless you're very spiritual. Okay, people often present with these types of situations on their shopping lists for healing. And when I say shopping list, the things that they write down that they're struggling with. They would most likely come into a session reporting anxiety in these different environments. And then we have to have them click on the I'm uncomfortable in group situations icon, if you like, on the screen of their conscious minds, and open up that program. And by that I mean we have them begin to concentrate on this type of situation and how it makes them feel. Then we identify a matching historical event with the same emotions in it, and we clarify what is believed that produces these feelings. Once we have these elements together, we can invite the Spirit of Truth to minister freedom to them. Now, before we move on from this analogy or picture that we're creating about your conscious mind being like a screen, I'd like to point out that these icons are also readily accessible by shortcuts. So most of them are on our screen, whether it's a computer or a smartphone. It's a shortcut. We have them on our front screen because it's a shortcut to get us quickly into the program, to open the program quickly. And these shortcuts, if you like, bypass normal pathways of going into settings or going into programs, searching through the programs, finding that particular one and opening it up. Now, this is a helpful picture for us in terms of resolving habitual sin or besetting sin cycles. So let's create a common scenario. Now, imagine a married woman struggles with rejection, having never had true love and acceptance in childhood. So as a consequence, deep inside, she believes she's not lovable or not good enough to be noticed. Now, the spouse, who has his own issues, he's always at work, or he's playing golf, or he's down at the pub or the hotel with his friends. He feels that he's shown her enough love by getting her a nice house and a new car. Okay, now along the way, she meets a nice man at work who comments on her hair and that she looks lovely today. Later, he invites her for a coffee, and she thinks, well, this is harmless enough, and she's feeling good about the attention. And so up until this point, the whole process is going through normal pathways of still feeling that this is wrong at some level, knowing that you shouldn't be doing it, but at the same time mistaking the good feelings of being cared about and noticed as love and acceptance, okay? Now, usually your emotional needs will be the greatest predictor of your behaviour, and so eventually she moves past this self-conflict and ends up in an illicit relationship. Now, after the first time, the person no longer works through the normal pathways regarding whether or not the sin should be entered into. So now this is the apparent solution to their rejection, and they shortcut the process and go straight through to the sinful activity without any resistance and trying to work out whether it's right or wrong or trying to stop yourself. So typically with both men and women, when their rejection's resolved, they struggle even to see how they could have gotten into a situation such as this. Another example of a shortcut, if you like, might be a man who's addicted to pornography. At one time, he felt convicted and guilty, and he tried to stop. But eventually, when the opportunity or situation presents for him to now access the sin, it's now a shortcut, and he goes directly to the sin without any opposition or working through his conscience. His heart is hardened, and he no longer goes through any thinking processes that would hold resistance or objection. He goes directly into the sin. In 2 Peter 2:19 it says, "For a man is a slave to whatever has mastered him." So now he's mastered and there is no opposition. It has complete authority over him. Okay, so many sins have an emotional need component as the original trigger, and that needs to be resolved to take away the power of the sin. And in this, Christians aren't any different to anyone else in terms of their humanity and their emotional needs. They're not the same as other people, however, in the fact that they have the opportunity to be set free if they want to, and dare I even say, the responsibility to be set free for the sake of God's glory and a witness to other people in the world. So in summary then, as a tool to help our understanding, we know that when people look to us to connect them to God for healing, we need to get them to go through the exercise of connecting consciously and deliberately with the information that they hold in their hearts. Remember, this is going to be thoughts and self-beliefs largely coming from their centre. Okay, now some people are hesitant to do that, and you may need to spend some time working through getting them to look at the problem and bring it up onto the screen of their conscious minds. They first of all need to understand the ministry. So quiet rooms and a one-on-one session are ideal for this where possible, where people can, if they're prepared to, can concentrate on these thoughts without any distractions, and we have them focus on these things. I call that going to periscope depth, where they're actually now starting to look at their inner world and their inner realities and beliefs, and explore those things that are underneath in the heart. So something else I should note as we finish up this particular study is we can only minister to whatever a person is wanting help with. It's entirely up to them. God will not make them get ministry, and neither should we. Our job is to offer healing if they desire it and present it as well as we can, and we encourage people to work through every single thing that they can find. But some people will, for example, be pleased to get rid of a fear or something like that's troubling them, but they're happy to keep their pride and rebellion and other problems. I had a man come in one day who was suicidal, and I ministered to the suicidal issues. He no longer wanted to kill himself, but he was quite happy to keep all his other rejection issues and things because he dealt with them by manipulating other people. And so in this case, it's almost as if people go, "Thanks for that, God. Thanks for the bit that bothered me, setting me free of that, but I'm taking over again and I'm satisfied with my own solutions from here." Well, this is still between God and the person. It's not our place to judge, only to be equipped to help where possible, and we can only work with whatever issue they present with. And as it says in 2 Timothy, we can gently be able to help them to deal with the things where they oppose themselves. All right, but we're going to come back in a little while, and in the next study we're going to look at some of the sources of and influences on heart beliefs. All right, we'll see you soon.